Welcome to Real Estate Hot Wired. Maggie Rose March will be your host today. She is an informed voice for the novice investor, a voice of reason for the seasoned investor. And we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Maggie Rose, and this is Real Estate Hot Wired. Today we are talking with Peter West from Bishop West Real Estate about being a first-time home buyer. Peter is a consummate real estate broker who is dedicated to his profession. No stranger to business, Peter has worked in residential, commercial, appraisal, land, new home sales, and he's also worked as a mortgage originator. Originally, he focuses on commercial investment and development on his own behalf and for clients on a nationwide basis. Peter's approach with clients is based on his counseling model versus a sales approach. Peter has 4 different professional real estate licenses as a real estate agent in Massachusetts, as a real estate broker, Peter, in both Massachusetts, New York, Vermont, and Florida. He's also an instructor in Massachusetts, Florida, and New York. And he has more professional designations and certifications than I can go through, but important to mention that he's a certified residential specialist as well as a graduate of the Real Estate Institute. And he's received he was also inducted into the Buyer's Agent Hall of Fame. And in 2020, Jack Hunt Excellence in Education Award from the Society of Exchange Counselors. He's affiliated with both the Venice Area Board of Realtors and the Sarasota Manatee Association of Realtors and the Florida Association of Realtors, and also with National Association of Realtors and CCIM. So we are very fortunate to have him today. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Thanks, Maggie. I'm glad to be here today.
Well, I'm excited about today's show because I know we can change some people's lives today because of what the information and some of the information that you'll be sharing with us as we talk about and investigate the first-time home buyers market here in Florida. So first, I want to clear up that big question for our listeners because there is a lot of confusion and myth around this. And I know I've addressed this before, but a first-time home buyer typically is someone who hasn't owned a home in the past 3 years. So if you have not owned real estate in the last 36 months, then you might possibly be eligible for first-time home buyer program. So that kind of clears it up. So it's not that you've never owned before, but that it's been at least 36 months. And then there are other things that you do have to, address with the loan originator.
Well, and some of them, Maggie, to that point, is generally a guideline would be the 3 years. However, some loans it's 2 years, but you also have to look if one of the parties, if it's a couple, for example, sometimes depending on the loan, if one of them has never owned, they may qualify. So if any of the listeners believe that they may qualify, they should always ask the question, do we qualify for a first-time home buyer program or specific mortgage product?
That's a good way of putting it. I like that. Very concise and very clear. And do you think, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, I think the other thing, too, is sometimes life circumstances change, and there are certain circumstances with different loan products that would qualify you that, for example, if you were in a terrible divorce and you lost the house to foreclosure, and now you've got your life back together and you're with a different party, some of those unique circumstances are exceptions. And again, it just goes back to what I said earlier, is you have to ask the lender specifically what constitutes or what qualifies a first-time home buyer program.
for their program, for their specific program. And talking about life circumstances and things changing, maybe we should just talk a tiny bit about coronavirus right now, just because we're in the middle of, or maybe even for us in America, the beginning of what is a big, huge event, a pandemic that we don't know a whole lot about. And people are showing some concern right now might not be a good time to buy. What are your thoughts on that?
It's interesting you say that, because if you have the TV on or you're on social media, the whole world has come to a screaming halt. When the reality is that we're here specifically in our office making arrangements and looking at how we're going to be doing things differently in the next few weeks, potentially months, or maybe things will move differently. Right now, I think with the interest rates as low as they are, a silver lining to that cloud perhaps may be that if some folks are shying away from buying, those, particularly the first-time home buyers, haven't been able to compete in the marketplace. Maybe this will take some of the buyers out of the market. So instead of getting 5 offers on a house, you might get 2 offers on a house. But in both markets that we serve, and I'm monitoring both as well, there are still offers. People haven't stopped looking at homes. People have been looking for homes, and I wouldn't say they're desperate to find one, but the competition with the inventory shortage nationwide has made it so that if this eliminates some buyers, there are some buyers that are able to get in and maybe have the opportunity of getting a chance at something where they've been shut out before. So I would think that as long as you haven't been sick in the past week or so, it's still business as usual going forward. My agents are out there showing properties. They're writing offers. I personally wrote a contract this morning from looking with buyers that have been out for the past 2 days.
So I think I agree with you. I think right now might be a great time to buy. And if you're already have your house listed and you're trying to get it sold, don't panic. Just, let's go through the process. The reason you pick good professional people is that it's our job to take you through this process, and we want to do that. Let us do that. Let us help you.
Yeah, we're here, at Bishop West, we're working with our clients and talking, first off, conversations, having a conversation, finding out what their thought is. If nobody's sick in the household and we ask buyers if they're sick, there's no reason. If you want a little extra caution, perhaps you open all the doors and all the closet doors and the cabinet doors, the vanity doors in the bathroom, so people can look in without touching, and maybe have some hand sanitizer coming and going. But I think if everybody remains vigilant and keeps a smart head up among themselves and looks out for their neighbor, that this is a very strong country, and we've gone through worse things, believe it or not, than this. So I think we will be coming out of this very strong. We may do things a little bit differently, but getting back to the topic of the show, I think if you're a first-time home buyer, now is not the time to retreat. Now is the time to get into it, because the competition you've been up against may be waning, and may is the key word. Showings are still happening. Buyers are still calling. I think you might almost see an uptick with everybody home searching the web looking for something. You may see an uptick in the market right now.
Very, very astute observation. I agree with you. And I noticed that attendance is still pretty strong on the open houses. I did notice that the buyers will, we went in to look at one house. It wasn't an open house. We had an appointment, and it was a messy house. It wasn't even a dirty house. It was just messy, very lived in. And the buyer said, no, I'm all right. I don't want to see that, and wouldn't go in. So, so everybody's feeling a little more cautious, and self-preservation is kicking in. But still, I think you're right. And I think this is a good time to be looking, and just use your head. So Peter, let's talk about How old? Let's talk about that. How old do you have to be to buy a home here in Florida?
Legally, you need to be 18 years old. So at 18, you could be looking at buying your own first home.
So that clears that up for anyone who's wondering or thinks that it's too soon to start. Most of us are out of high school. Maybe we're going to college, but there's always opportunities if you're going to be paying rent anyway. That's something to think about. There are a lot of programs that have been available in Florida. Now, remember, it's the banks that deal with the grant programs, but the Florida housing programs may provide an affordable path to owning a home. So if you're considering owning or making a home purchase in one of Florida's federally designated target areas, you may be able to take advantage of some of these programs. They're designated by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and the targeted area is a neighborhood, a street, or a block where at least 70% of the households earn less than 80% of the state median income. So what are some of the advantages of these bank programs is that they offer some down payment assistance. Some of them will require a secured second mortgage. They usually, those mortgage, if they do something like that, it's a non-interest bearing, non-amortizing loan. Usually they're not due for 30 years or upon the sale of the house. But go ahead.
One of the best mortgage products out there, and keep in mind the topic of the show is first-time home buyer. However, you don't need to be a first-time home buyer, and you hinted at it, was the FHA program.
Yes.
And that's a nationwide program. That is a government-backed program, and it is a lower down payment program. With an FHA home loan, a buyer can get into a primary residence anywhere between 0 and 3.5% down, depending on income, credit, and circumstances. So if we look at 3% down, well, that's not far off from what you would need if you're going to rent a place with first, last, and security.
Exactly.
And right now, with interest rates as low as they are, historic lows, $150,000 mortgage is about $600, and I think it's $60 without calculating it out, $650 principal and interest a month. So when you add your taxes and your insurance, you're quite possibly in many markets lower owning than you are renting, monthly payment wise.
Exactly. It's usually very young people aren't quite ready to think about. When I say very young, usually your typical 18, 19, 20-year-old isn't thinking that way about money yet. But I think the sooner you think about it, and I've known people who have started in real estate when they were 19 and have certainly have tremendous stories to share and tell from how their lives have changed from just understanding that there was a way for them to own. And one of our first guests talked about that the reason he bought his first house was so that he wouldn't have to pay rent. And he ended up realizing, 5-6 years down the road that he was living rent free, that he was buying, fixing up, and selling, and he was technically not even having to pay rent. And was able to do an owner finance to get in that first one.
Well, you mentioned that, but if you are thinking of moving out of your parents' home, you're either going to go sign a lease or a rental agreement, which is a commitment and has legal ramifications. What's the difference in signing a note and a mortgage to the bank or a mortgage company? You still have legal obligations. You still have to pay the monthly payment. So it's a matter of thinking, what is better for me? Now, I know young 18 and 19-year-olds that are buying houses. Where are they buying houses? They're buying houses where they're going to college, because instead of paying room and board, why not buy a house, rent out a couple of the rooms, and probably live there for free and not have the room and board expense on top of your tuition.
Well, it makes sense. It really does make sense. And I think that is, I often I used to say this to my two boys.